Welcome back to Dark Corner's Physical Media Reviews. We're looking at two new 4K releases from Studio Canal of late-ish Hammer films. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb is the higher profile, Hammer's final Mummy film, and the one that replaces the traditional Mummy with Valerie Leon. A modern adaptation of Arthur Conan Doyle's Jewel of the Seven Stars, filming was beset with tragedy, losing star Peter Cushing after the death of his wife, and director Seth Holt, who passed away 5 weeks into filming, leaving confused footage that proved tough to salvage. It is a flawed film, a great idea that fails to reach its potential, but it is also filled with good stuff. Wild ideas, memorable deaths, and creepy images. In our video looking at all of the Hammer Mummy films, I called it one of the most original Mummy films ever made, and Hammer's most successful attempt to marry their gothic style to a more modern setting. It also marries those millennia-old ideas to hip psychology and mind expansion, proving that while the delivery changes, that need for another world is always there and always fascinating.
Wait until she is ready.
She is ready now.
Demons of the Mind takes a similarly psychological approach to what initially seems like traditional Hammer, with runaway coaches and pretty girls chased through the forest and caught. There are lots of Hammer touchstones here, and it could be easily recast, with Cushing and Lee playing the roles essayed by Robert Hardy.
Perhaps it's time the fear of God came back.
And Patrick McGee.
Demons of the Mind.
I must also mention Michael Hordern, who is at his most eccentrically Michael Hordern.
I make no complaint. Nor dare I question the judgment of this reign.
But if the setup is familiar, complete with sweet young love interest,
Help me.
then the demon of the title is well outside Hammer's traditional area.
Madness eating us all like carrion birds that kill.
I don't want to say too much because that sort of is the point, but I will say what it's not: a werewolf. And the reason I mention that is because in the original script, it was a werewolf, and Hammer, still shying away from the subject 10 years after Curse of the Werewolf's failure, insisted that that be cut. And since I learnt that, every time I watch the film, I find myself thinking, oh, that would have been great.
Animal prowling in the night.
I do think the film goes overboard with the blood. And the nudity is the definition of gratuitous, in that there is no reason for it other than the obvious. It's almost an exploitation House of Usher.
This place reeks of madness and decay.
Not quite as good as that sounds, but still good. Its pleasingly doom-laden atmosphere, punctuated by bursts of sudden violence. But I can't help thinking that the basic plot would have worked better with werewolves. I probably shouldn't have mentioned it. I've ruined it for you now.
But there is much to do before we triumph over the darkness of the mind.
Nice cover. Cover art, which you get the poster as well. 2 DVDs, Blu-ray and Ultra HD. The booklet, it sort of goes without saying it's not as good as the ones that Hammer do for their own releases. But you've got 3 essays. This one's sort of on the sort of an overview of the film and its making. The one I am finding interesting, not that that one wasn't, but the most interesting one in here, I think, is this by Kat Ellinger, which is interesting because I don't think of Demons of the Mind as being a classic Hammer film, but Ellinger points out that it is within a sort of a classical Gothic film, within that tradition of a family that feels cursed. And that I think is quite interesting, placing it in a wider classical tradition. And then this one by Peter Raleigh, which is more of a sort of a psychological examination, I suppose, in the Freudian themes of it. It's a very psychological horror film, really. And then the elements of the original press kit. I do prefer it when they retain some of the style of the original press kit.
I don't wish to kill anybody. I just want what's mine.
I like the fact that they've included the severed hand, but it is sort of floating there. And again, Blu-ray and Ultra HD. And similarly to Demons of the Mind, we've got the sort of overview from Paul Farrell. And then there's sort of a recurring theme in this, in these essays, or at least something that's touched upon by all of them. This one by David Huckvale, and most notably in the last essay by Peter Raleigh, that this is a sort of inversion of some of the gender norms that you usually find in horror films and certainly in Hammer films, and all of the essays are written by men, which doesn't mean that they are not worth reading, of course, but it just struck me as funny. And the press kit, again, it's sort of all the information, but not in the original style, which I do think is a bit of a shame.
You've got to tell me everything.
Right, so you get 2 posters with each one. This is the box artwork for Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, a title that comes from basically pulling buzzwords out of midair and putting them together. It does have the severed hand, but I don't think tonally, I don't feel it sums up the film, whereas I think probably this is a worse poster. This is one of the original ones. It's a bit busy, but it does sum up the film more in a way. Although this one doesn't have the severed hand, I don't think. Just basically 3 images of Valerie Leon, and I don't know what on earth is happening to... That can't be Andrew Keir. I think that's one of the killed characters. The more I look at that, the odder image it is. It's his glasses falling off. It's the Doctor, and I've forgotten who played him, but yeah.
Get back to bed, Margaret. I'm going to give you something to help you sleep for a while.
Similar deal with Demons of the Mind. So this again is the box artwork, and again it's a pretty striking image. I think I'm not convinced it really sums up the film tonally, but it is a good image. Whereas in this case, the original poster, and there are multiple posters, but this is the one that there were multiple posters for Demons of the Mind. This is the one that's available. I don't think that sums up the film, and I don't think it's a particularly good poster either. Not really a fan of that, although I quite like this little image here of Michael Hordern is the part of the poster that I like. None of the rest of that really works for me, to be honest. Would you have that on your wall?
No.
Both films pull in bonus features from previous releases, including Steve Haberman's excellent commentaries, which convey a lot of information without bombarding you with facts and CVs. Demons of the Mind also includes a track with director Peter Sykes, screenwriter Christopher Wicking, and actress Virginia Wetherill. Moderated by film historian Jonathan Southcott. Always good to have a first-hand account, especially when it's delivered long enough after the event that they are free to be honest. Both films have interviews with sound recordist Tony Dorr, while Blood from the Mummy's Tomb also has camera operator Neil Binney, Valerie Leon, and Christopher Wicking. Short making-ofs round out the archival features for both films. New are fresh interviews with Valerie Leon and with Virginia Wetherill, which is the more interesting, though Leon's does show what a lovely woman she is and how grateful she is to have this film in her CV. Publicity photos from Blood from the Mummy's Tomb are still the best-selling on her website. Finally, the always reliable Kim Newman shares his thoughts on Hammer's Mummy franchise with a focus on Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. Little new, but it's hard to beat Newman's enthusiasm.
You'll be safe if you give it to me.
Late Hammer always has a caveat hanging over it, and these two really do illustrate that tug between the old guard and the arty youngbloods. The good news for us is that in that conflict, both films find something interesting and entertaining. New takes on old ideas. Not all of it lands, it does feel desperate, but it's still a good watch.
What would you do to possess it all?
Anything.
The bad news at the time was that what the films really illustrate is that neither side knew what people wanted. They had lost their old audience and were struggling to find a new one. I wonder what they would think if they knew we were still watching and still enjoying 50 years later. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts on these in the comments below. And Demons of the Mind with Werewolves. Can you see it?